Here's something nobody wants to admit. You can spend an entire day being busy and produce absolutely nothing of value. Not because you were lazy, not because you didn't care, but because every single thing you were doing was a very convincing substitute of the actual work. I've been guilty of this for most of my life, but over Easter, I finally had to confront it. The first half of the Easter holidays, I was living in the future, genuinely. The mental highlight reel of what things would look like when I got going. I was journaling about ideas, making lists about making lists, and having long internal monologues about the kind of person I was becoming. Very inspiring, very cinematic, completely useless. Nothing was getting made, nothing was getting done. I was so busy being the future version of myself that I couldn't be bothered to do anything about the present one. And the thing is, it didn't even feel like procrastination. It felt productive. It felt like momentum, which is honestly the most dangerous kind of avoidance. The one that looks like ambition from the outside. It took until the second half of the holidays for something to click. I remember sitting down one afternoon looking at the list of things that I'd been meaning to do and thinking, none of this is going to happen unless I do it today. Not tomorrow, not when things calm down, today. And something about actually internalizing that rather than just knowing it intellectually changed how I moved. I stopped asking what I should be doing more of and started asking what I should be doing less of. And that became the list. Hey guys, I'm Navya. I'm a psychology student at university, and today I'm going to talk about the anti-to-do list. There's a bias in behavioral economics called the subtraction neglect. The idea that when we want to improve something, our brains automatically reach for addition. More habits, more systems, more input. Subtraction doesn't feel like progress because you can't exactly see it. You can't point to the thing you didn't do. So we keep piling on, wondering why nothing feels lighter. But there's something else going on too. Something that I think is more personal. Psychologists talk about temporal self-appraisal, which is essentially this. We tend to hold on to our future selves in much higher regard than our present ones. Future me is disciplined and clear-headed and gets things done before noon. Present me is apparently just the rough draft. And so what happens is we keep deferring to her. We trust her with all the important stuff, thinking I'll really commit to this when the time is right, without ever deciding when right actually is. The problem is that future you is being built entirely by what present you does today. If you keep handing her an empty foundation and expecting a mansion, that's on you. The anti-to-do list is my way of closing the gap, not by doing more, but by being ruthlessly honest about what I keep doing that isn't serving me. So, here's the anti-to-do list. One is that I stopped living in the future and started working in the present. I already told you about Easter, so you understand the shape of this one. But the specific thing I had to quit is what I can only describe as romanticizing the destination. I had a plan and then I had a vision board that I kept visiting when I should have been working. And researchers actually have a name for why this backfires. Mental contrasting failure, which describes what happens when the act of visualizing the goal starts to replace the act of pursuing it. The neuroscience of this is that when you vividly imagine achieving something, your brain activates the same reward circuitry as if you've already done it. The nucleus accumbens releases dopamine. You get the hit. And because your brain has already registered something approximating success, the urgency to actually go get it quietly deflates. You've essentially tricked yourself into thinking you've already arrived somewhere you haven't even started to walk towards yet. So you plan and you vision and you imagine, and meanwhile the work sits there waiting. I stopped obsessing over the vision. The vision didn't need tending. The work does. 2 was that I fixed my sleep, and I didn't realize how much I needed to until I did. This wasn't originally on the list but I'd be leaving something important out if I didn't mention it. Over the holidays, I got my sleep into a rhythm that I haven't had in probably years. I sleep by 10:30, awake naturally at 7:30 without an alarm. But ever since coming to uni, it's definitely moved up from 10:30 to 11:30, and instead of 7:30, it's 8:30. Nevertheless, what happened was strange in the best way. I started dreaming again. Or rather, I started remembering my dreams, which I think is a different thing. Not just fragments, but actual narratives that I could actually follow and make sense of after I woke up. Which, if you know anything about sleep science, is a sign that your REM cycles are doing what they're supposed to do. The research on this is fascinating. REM sleep is when the brain consolidates memories, processes emotions, and draws unexpected connections between the things you've been thinking about. A well-rested brain is not just a more energetic brain, but it's also a more creative one, a more emotionally regulated one, and a significantly more focused one. What I noticed practically was I suddenly had opinions and ideas when I woke up in the morning that I didn't have before. I also noticed, and this sounds obvious when you say it, how much of the day there actually is when you're awake for it. Getting up at 8:30 and not feeling like you're being punished for it genuinely changes how you move throughout the day. There is so much time. We just sleep through most of it, then wonder why we're always running out. 3 is that I stopped letting consumption eat my creation. Mostly. This one is more complicated than I initially thought. And I want to be honest about that. The obvious version of this is stop scrolling, protect your headspace, yada yada yada. And yes, broadly true. I try to stop consuming other people's content first thing in the morning, but I'm not perfect. I do notice that sometimes your best ideas come from silent, not from input. When your brain is constantly full, there's no space for anything original to surface. But what I actually had to sit with was the question of which media was draining me versus which was genuinely feeding something. For a while, I was genuinely anxious about what I was watching. Like, is this TV show making me less creative? Should I be reading instead? Is this the right kind of consumption? And that anxiety was its own kind of mental noise. The reframe that helped was this. Long form content tends to open up something in me. A good documentary, a long YouTube essay, a film that takes its time. That stuff tends to spark ideas rather than kill them. Short form does the opposite, mostly. Much less short form that is about storytelling than like extremely short form that just gives you a dopamine hit. It's not that short form is evil, it's that it trains your attention to expect constant novelty, which makes sustained focus feel unbearable. So the boundary I actually set wasn't zero media, it was being more deliberate about the kind of media I let in, and less guilty about the rest. 4 was that I stopped multitasking my attention. Multitasking isn't a skill. It's a myth with measurable cost. What we call multitasking is actually task switching, and every switch carries a cognitive penalty. Neuroscientists call this attention residue. When you move from one task to another, a part of your brain stays behind on the previous one. You're never fully where you think you are. The research suggests the performance cost of this can be equivalent to losing a meaningful portion of your effective cognitive capacity in the moment. It's not a rounding error, it's significant. The most specific version of this for me was music. And I want to be honest about this because if you know me at all, you know my relationship with music is not casual. I am genuinely embarrassingly obsessed. There are playlists for every mood, every season, every era of my life. Music is not background for me, it's a whole experience. Which is exactly why it took me so long to admit that I cannot have it on when I'm trying to do something that requires actual thought. I kept trying, I kept thinking maybe this playlist, maybe this genre, maybe quieter. No, because if music is on, I am listening to music. That is what I'm doing. It has my full attention in the shower, in the car, when I'm going on a walk. Putting it on while I'm supposed to be in deep work just means I'm doing two things badly instead of one thing well. So now, music gets my full attention when I have nothing else to give it to. And work gets silence. It sounds like a small thing, but it isn't. 5 was that I stopped treating isolation like discipline. There's an idea floating around in ambitious spaces that to really get things done, you have to opt out of life. Skip the party, leave the group chat on mute, be unavailable. And I don't think that's entirely true. And I think that framing is doing a lot of damage to a lot of people who are already tired. What I actually found is the opposite. Going to the library instead of working in your room sounds trivially small, but something real happens when you're surrounded by other people who are also working. Psychologists call it social facilitation. The presence of others engaged in the same kind of effort raises your performance, almost without trying. You borrow the room's focus, you match its energy. And it works out in the other direction too. Occasionally going out where I'm surrounded by people has repeatedly left me more motivated to work, not less. There's something about breaking out of your own head, hearing how different people are thinking about things, being reminded that the world is larger than your to-do list. That resets something in you. The mood lifts, your perspective shifts, and genuine human connection, the kind that happens where you're actually present somewhere and not performing productivity, releases the same neurochemicals that make you feel capable and energized. You come back to your work with more to say, not less. The nuance I had to sit with was the difference between showing up everywhere because of FOMO and showing up to places you actually wanted to show up to. The first one is exhausting and produces nothing. The second one refills something. And the thing about time management that no one really tells you is that it isn't about protecting every hour from the world. It's about being honest with yourself to know which hours need guarding and which ones need spending. A degree and a side hustle can coexist with a life. They have to, actually, or neither one is sustainable. Somewhere along the way, we decided that the quality of life is measured by its fullness, by how much is happening, by how many plates are spinning, how packed the schedule looks. And I think that idea is quietly exhausting a generation full of people who feel like they're doing everything but still feeling behind. What Easter taught me, really taught me, not just as a concept I could repeat, is that clarity is not something you find. It's something you make room for. You don't think your way into it or plan your way into it. You get there by removing the things that are eating the space where it should be. And what's left, once you've done that, tends to be exactly what you needed to be doing all along. You don't need more. You need less, done properly. And that's a much more interesting challenge than adding another habit to a list that's already too long. Thank you guys so much for watching. If that video resonated with you, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe because it would help me out so much. I'm Navya and I will see you guys next week. Bye!